Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, and on today's episode, underrated guitar players of the 80s. I did a video on underrated singers. I'll leave a link to that down below. I thought it would be fun to do underrated metal guitar players of the 80s. There's the names, of course, that everybody recognizes that get a lot of praise, like George Lynch and Warren DeMartini and Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads, and justifiably so. They're great players, and plenty of others. But I thought it would be fun to kind of pick out some guitar players who maybe don't get talked about as much when you're thinking about the 80s guitar heroes and stuff like that. Okay, these are in no particular order. The first one I picked is from TNT. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Ronni Le Tekro. He has an interesting sound. It's kind of like Eddie Van Halen, but a European Eddie Van Halen in some ways. It reminds me of like Vito Bratta, but again, it has sort of a European flair to it. He's really kind of technical. He's got a cool sound, real sort of classic 80s, but there's that little bit of a European tinge to it that I really like. Okay, next, David T. Chastain from the band Chastain, and he also has a bunch of solo albums under his name, like instrumental type guitar albums. He's had a band CJSS that I loved. And he's very much a guitar shredder in that sort of neoclassical vein, but he really has his own kind of sound. And I'm always shocked that his name doesn't come up more often, considering the amount of music. He put out an incredible amount of music. He had his own record label. This particular release is on Metal Blade, but he had, I believe his label was called Leviathan, I believe. But he just put out a ton of stuff. He was very active, very busy. He had a really cool sound and really cool style. When I think of him, I always think about, he does this. Most guitar players, when they do these fast runs, they go up the neck, that kind of thing. And he always went the other way, which I always thought was really cool. But he's a great shredder, and I'm not sure why his name doesn't get talked about more often when people talk about like Yngwie Malmsteen, Paul Gilbert, people like that. Okay, next, from Voivod, Piggy. As he's described on this album, he plays burning, melting axe. And Voivod, they're an interesting band. They're a band that I don't think I've ever done any videos on them. I really have to be in the mood for them because their sound is really kind of chaotic and dissonant and all over the place. But that's sort of what's interesting about his playing. They fall into the thrash genre, which I guess makes sense, but his playing is so bizarre. It's so weird. It's so unique. It's kind of all over the place. It's very non-traditional, very hard to kind of pin down. His riffing is very bizarre. Again, it's a little kind of chaotic, so I have to be in the mood for it. But every time I listen to it, I just think, man, this is so weird. This is so bizarre, this guitar playing, but it's so cool. It totally works for the band. All right, from Winger, Reb Beach. I always talk about Winger being kind of an underrated band in some ways because they get this bad reputation because they came around at the end of the 80s and their videos and stuff, and they've kind of become like this punching bag for 80s hair metal, what people didn't like about that era. Man, oh man, was everybody in this band great players. And Reb Beach is just like off the charts. I mean, I believe he was like a studio guy before he joined Winger. But I mean, he just has chops like a fusion guitar player. I mean, chops to burn. There's a live video of them, like I think it was like in the MTV studios playing Headed for a Heartbreak, where he goes off at the end of it. And it is just absolutely incredible. I mean, he's just on another level again, like sort of jazz fusion, great sound, incredible technique, amazing riffs. And he just kind of gets overlooked because he was in Winger, and Winger has this unfortunately undeserved bad rep. So definitely love Reb Beach. All right, my last one, and this is probably a guy most popular band out of the list on here. Maybe he's not underrated, but I kind of think he is. Matthias Jabs. Came into the Scorpions on Love Drive, where he was kind of sharing the album with Michael Schenker. Animal Magnetism, love Animal Magnetism. I especially love Matthias's playing on Blackout in this album. he's always doing like these guitar fills, and the way he plays against Rudolf Schenker, where Rudolph plays very kind of straightforward, like Malcolm Young style rhythm guitar, but Matthias is just all over, like playing these crazy fills. I mean, think about the song Blackout and Bad Boys Running Wild and stuff. He doesn't just play the riff. It's like he's almost soloing throughout the whole song, and maybe in some ways it gets a little annoying. But I love it. I think it's great, and I'm kind of surprised he doesn't get mentioned more as an influence from people, 80s guitar players. I found it interesting. Michael Akerfeld from Opeth, I've heard him mention Matthias Jabs as an influence. And he's like one of the only guys I've ever heard mention that. And maybe too, it's because again, Michael Schenker was in the band early on during, then and later in the 70s, Ole Roth. So Matthias sort of gets overshadowed. And then once they started getting more commercial, I think he reined his guitar playing in. But man, his playing on like the late 70s, these early 80s stuff is just fantastic. So, all right, there you go. My 5 picks for underrated 80s metal guitar players. Let me know what you think of my picks. Let me know some of your picks down below. Till we see you again, make sure you stay metal.